Good morning, Wabash. Our speaker today currently serves the college as Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid. He came to Wabash in 1997 and is currently completing his 12th year in this role. Please welcome Dean Steve Klein for his chapel talk. As honors goes, so goes the year.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the Sphinx Club for inviting me to speak today. It's rare that I get a chance to address the Wabash student body, and it's an honor to do so. Yes, I know you've heard plenty from me in the past when you were high school students, but that's different. Back then you were guests, and now we're family. I suspect that it's more than a coincidence that as the person in charge of admissions, I stand here on the eve of Honor Scholarship Weekend. The full program actually starts today at 4 p.m. as we kick off the Fine Arts Scholarship Program. Our staff and drivers are situated at the new airport as we speak to greet high school seniors just getting off the runway. It's always an honor to speak in the chapel. From my sense of Wabash history, it's the most hallowed space on our grounds. It's a place where we gather to consider, to reflect, and to celebrate that which is most special about our community. In my role as dean, I typically get to stand up here twice a year. Once at the ringing in ceremony, very emotional time, one that you shared with your classmates and families. And once while you were in high school if you attended Honor Scholarship Weekend. Perhaps you remember that. You were rushed in, you had a 30-minute welcome, you were briefed on the honor schedule and the housing options, then you were whisked away to eat lunch so you could be on time for your English exam. Undoubtedly, you've heard many chapel talks since that time, and they've evoked a range of reactions, from boredom to keen interest, from confusion to laughter, from sadness to inspiration. My favorite chapel is the Monon Bell Chapel. It stirs up the passion of what it means to be a Wabash man. It focuses on an event that means something to the entire community. In many people's minds, the outcome of that bell game sets a tone on campus for the rest of the year. I can remember being told when I first arrived at the college, you can notice the difference around campus when we have the bell. Of course, the Monon Bell represents more than just a football game. It's a full week of preparation and activity, and it doesn't only involve the football team. It requires the entire campus to suit up, and it celebrates a tradition that goes back to 1890. There aren't many that go back that far. Well, one actually does, the Honor Scholarship Program. Not quite 1890, but close enough. The first Honor Scholarship Program goes back to 1893, and you can read all about it in the Wabash archives if you're so inclined. You'll find out through the 1893-94 annual catalog that students sat through the exams that year on a Tuesday and Wednesday, and not in April, but in September. Just think, those students taking those tests had parents who grew up during the Civil War. There were 5 scholarship winners at that time, and they were awarded full tuition, which then was $8. Now, that's not as cheap as you think, guys, because that was only for a semester. It was actually $16 a year. But nonetheless, a far cry from today's top $20,000 a year award. Well, the history is interesting, but the point I want to make is this. As special as the Monon Bell game and weekend is, no event or weekend is more important to the college than Honor Scholarship Weekend. This is the weekend, more than any other, that shapes the future of Wabash College. This college will only remain as great as the quality of students we are able to attract. Honor Scholarship Weekend is our last big chance, gentlemen, to make the case for Wabash. Make it by expressing who we are, what we stand for, and how the Wabash experience can transform their lives in ways that our competition cannot. And we know who the competition is. The success of this weekend will shape next fall's freshman class. Will it be large enough to support our budget and fill our fraternities and residence halls? Will it be diverse enough to make classes and student life thought-provoking and intriguing? Will it be talented enough to set the bar high in the classroom, on our athletic teams, and in fine arts activities? And will members of the class be passionate enough to be good Wabash men, so they commit themselves to provide leadership across campus and to honor the traditions of the college, such as the gentleman's rule? Now, I know it's difficult to shift gears. You've been on spring break. Maybe some of you still on spring break. Visiting foreign countries, warmer states, exciting cities, or perhaps you just lounged around at home as a royal guest. I even took a little break myself in Florida to defrost and get a glimpse of the new Major League Baseball season. But now it's time to focus on Wabash College. And I thought the best way to get us all tuned in to Honor Scholarship Weekend and the challenge at hand is to share some perspectives on the weekend. Student perspectives, a faculty perspective, and an alumnus perspective.
Thank you, Dean Klein, and I hope you guys can hear me. Good morning, Wabash. My name is Gary James. I'm a junior political science major and rhetoric minor, and I'm a Martindale RA and originally from York, Alabama, and I'm excited to speak to you guys today about Honor Scholar. As we prepare to receive hundreds of prospective students for our 116th Honor Scholar Weekend, I can't help but to think back to my own experiences as a prospective. When people ask, why did you choose Wabash? I say what most people say. I felt at home here. I could relate to people here. I felt like I wouldn't just be a number. But this isn't just some magical feeling that takes over people once they cross the threshold of Wabash Avenue. Students don't go down a rabbit hole like Alice and discover a Wabash wonderland of its own making. It's a product of our close community. Prospectives choose Wabash because of their interactions with students, staff, and faculty. They choose Wabash because of the community we have helped to build, the closeness we have helped to foster, the traditions we choose to preserve or remake, and the personal and intellectual strength we project. So it's our responsibility to be open and honest to perspectives we meet, to take time and ask about their interests and their aspirations, and to let them know that they will have a band of brothers who will have their backs. A good example of this for me was 2006 alumnus Tim Flowers. When he was a senior, I was a prospective. During Top 10 weekend, I stayed at Lambda Chi, and he spent time talking to me about politics and the Supreme Court. When I returned for Honor Scholar, I stayed at Kappa Sigma, but I saw Tim around, and we chatted, and he asked me what other schools I was applying to. They were all big schools, either close to home in Alabama or on the East Coast. He took me aside and said, hey, this is a small school, but you'll be a big fish in a small pond. You won't just be a number here. You should think about coming to Wabash. There were other people, events, and realities that shaped my decision to come to Wabash, but this continues to stand out in my mind as one of the most compelling exchanges I had during my Honor Scholar Weekend. Even though Wabash was hundreds of miles away from my home, and even though I didn't receive the Lilly Award, I chose to come here after experiences like this one with Tim because it was hard to imagine myself anywhere else. So as prospectives arrive on campus, in our dorms, in our classes, in our fraternity houses, let's be open and honest and inviting to them, as Tim Flowers was to me, and let's make their time here at least as good as ours, or maybe even better. Thank you.
Well, good morning, Wabash, and thank you to Dean Klein for asking me to spend a couple minutes sharing my thoughts on our work together recruiting the class of 2013. I actually spent a little more time than usual this year thinking about the college selection process. My daughter's a senior in high school, and while obviously Wabash isn't a school she's looking at, we've been all over the Midwest looking at a lot of small colleges, and it is probably not a bad exercise for faculty and staff to do. It was a little while ago that I had my own college choice to make. As I was preparing some notes for this, it was 24 years ago that I was a high school senior and choosing. Now, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Yes, come on. Chad, say, it's unbelievable, Dr. Feller. All right. All right. Good. All right. So at the time, I actually chose a small liberal arts college myself. It's a small liberal arts college in Oregon. It's called Willamette University. Probably none of you have ever heard of it before. If you did, you heard it referred to as Willamette, or you read it as Willamette. And just so that you go away from today's chapel learning something, let's be clear on this. The way you pronounce it is Willamette, damn it. So Willamette has a lot in common with Wabash. It's very old, founded in 1842, just 10 years after Wabash. Remember, this is all the way in Oregon, so that was the real frontier, gentlemen, all right? All right. They value tradition and even have a singing competition as one of its signature events, and you will find no pictures of me singing there, just in case you're wondering, all right? I did it, but it was very under the radar, so... When I was a student there, it was known as the oldest university in the West, and that seemed like a good name. It's now called the First University of the West, all right? Now, obviously, that's a stupid change. You know, colleges get new presidents, and they have to come up with some new idea, all right? And they do things, and we don't always like them. And in 20 years, you'll return, and you'll say, well, that wasn't a very good idea. But I think when you return to Wabash in 20 years, if it's like my experience I have when I return to my alma mater, it still feels right. The place feels right, and it feels like the place that I chose. And I think finding the place that's right for a student is the most important thing. That's the only advice I give my daughter. Find the place that feels right to you, all right? And when students come here, I try to find out what can we learn to help them know this is the right place for them, all right? And so I think as we have our visitors on campus this week, I think what we need to do is reach out to them as individuals. Find out what parts of the Wabash story we want to share with them so that they might feel that this is the right place for them. On one hand, this seems like an impossible task. I think the latest I heard was we may have as many as 380 prospective students, and that seems overwhelming, except that there's 900 students and a couple of hundred faculty and staff. And so, in fact, if we all reach out to one student this weekend, every one of our visitors will have heard several different pieces of the Wabash story and what it means to them. I realized the importance of this a few years back. I remember once first came, someone said, well, how do we fill the class at Wabash? And someone, it might have been Dean Klein, said, we fill the class one student at a time. And a few years ago, I went on a trip. We were doing a W night down in Evansville, all right? By the way, this is the worst call you can ever receive from Dean Klein. Could you go down and do a W night in Evansville? All right, we're going to drive there and back, crowded into a minivan, few admissions counselors, a coach and a faculty member, and we're going to do our show down there. And I remember it very clearly. I think Mike Reedy drove. We were packed in there. Coach Johnson and I were the speakers for the night. We drove down there, and that's when I really got to see what it means to bring in the class. As we drove down there, the admissions counselors are working their cell phones the whole way there, talking to guys, getting them to come to the W night. And what impressed me was no two guys heard the same story. Every admissions counselor worked. They knew what was important to that student. They knew what to say. No two people, there was no canned speech. They worked every one of, and the students here, I think, have experienced that. And I can tell you that when the admissions counselor is talking to you, he's talking to you, all right? Not to a high school student. He's talking to you. So I learned two things that night. The first, by the way, is never follow Rob Johnson in the speaking order, all right? After Coach Johnson had fired up the crowd, I think all I could do was stand there and say, yeah, ditto what Coach said, and walk away, all right? The second thing I learned, though, is what it means to recruit a student one at a time. So I would like you to, this weekend, reach out to a perspective. And I want to end with one short story. Last month, I opened up my copy of Chemical and Engineering News, all right? No. That wasn't a joke, all right? So I opened up my copy of C&E News to find a nice picture and story about Jeffrey Coates. Jeff Coates is a Wabash chemistry major, class of 1989. He's been pretty successful since he left Wabash. He's the youngest person to ever reach full professorship at Cornell University. He's earned at least 3 national awards in chemistry that I know of, where earning one of these for most people would make a career. He started his own company that makes biodegradable plastics, and last year was featured in Esquire magazine under a story on 6 ideas that may change the world. So here's what caught my eye when I read about Jeff. The story starts off by him describing how he came to chemistry. I quote, "I wasn't that interested in chemistry," he says. "In fact, what I really thought I wanted was a career in architecture." But he goes on to tell the story that he came to Wabash for Honor Scholar Weekend, scored the top score on the chemistry exam that weekend, and decided, well, maybe, and got a generous scholarship, all right, came to Wabash, and by the time he was a sophomore, realized chemistry was really his thing. So as we meet our guests this weekend, find out what they're about. Tell them the Wabash story, but also in that, tell them that part of the Wabash story is that they can change 180 degrees from what they're doing right now, and this could still be the place that they will feel at home. Thanks.
I'm even older. I have to get my glasses on. You guys will be happy to know I know Dr. Feller's daughter, and I'm pretty sure I know where she's going to go to college, and she'll be spending a lot of time here because she'll be right down there. So I'm John Roberts, class of '83, college doctor. I've probably seen half of you with your pants down, but especially after spring break. Yeah. Laugh now, you know. I love this place so much. When I was here, I decided I've got to come back here and practice. So I really love the community and the college in particular, and that's why I came back to Crawfordsville. So Dean Klein called me a couple of weeks ago, asked me to do this. It sounded like a great idea. Talk about my experience as a high school senior and honor scholars back when I was here. Get you guys kind of fired up to go out and recruit for the college. So I said, yeah, no problem. Then I hung up the phone and I said, oh, crap. How can I honestly deliver on this when I stand before you today having miserably failed to fulfill one of my primary duties as an alum of the college? My son is a freshman at the College of Worcester. Exactly. So how can I stand up here today and get you guys fired up? But I suppose I'm thankful that he's not going to go where my mother and my wife went, down there. So that's a good thing. So I have to give kudos to Dean Klein and his staff. I think they run a really professional organization. Going out last year with my son to look at various colleges, it's obvious that we're at the top of the pile as far as what we do to get students here. And as Dr. Feller mentioned, taking a personal interest in every one. So my first exposure to this place was kind of unusual. I was 14 years old. I was up here at Camp Rotary as a Boy Scout. I don't know if anybody's been out there or knows about it, but the pond out there that you would swim in is like 50 degrees, so it's impossible to do anything. So we came to the Wabash Pool to do our life-saving merit badge. So that's how I got introduced to Wabash initially, and now it's the locker rooms. The old pool's not there anymore. My next visit was Monon Bell weekend, the fall of my senior year. That pretty much sealed the deal. I stayed at the Fiji House with Clay Robbins, who's the president of Lilly Endowment now. I'm not going to tell you stories that shouldn't be told about Clay, but basically I was here for Monon Bell. I came here to the Monon Bell Chapel. You guys are all familiar with that. It got kind of wild in here, and all of a sudden, as a high school senior, I was escorted out the front door, thrown in the back of a pickup truck, and we were on our way to DePauw. So that's a pretty famous year, the fall of '78. The deans squared off on the street. There was lots of baseball bats, broken windows. It was pretty exciting for a senior from North Central in Indianapolis. So I got home. 5 days later, I opened up a letter from the college in the mail, and it's my acceptance letter to Wabash. So how sweet was that? That was better than the commercials, but life doesn't get any better than that. So that meant so much to me. I've saved that letter over the years. And my next exposure was Honor Scholars Weekend the following spring. So that was the 86th Honor Scholars, 30 years ago. Damn, I'm old. Even older than Dr. Feller. So I remember taking the bio exam, but the other exams really are a blur. I don't recall them at all, and that's evidenced by my subsequent relationship with student loan officers. Didn't get a dime from the college, so luckily all those are paid off now. So at this point, I've kind of got to have my obligatory alumni Wabash story. My fondest memory of this weekend was taking that bio exam and then receiving a letter, which I've also saved, from Dr. Thomas Cole, class of '58, affectionately known on campus as T. Cole when we were here. You may have noticed today we've got a speaker on campus, Dr. Francisco Ayala, who will be delivering one of the Cole lectures, so I'm giving that announcement now ahead of time. He's speaking at 4:15 in Hayes 313 and 8 p.m. in Ball Theater. So it's an honor to go speak to someone who comes and talks in Dr. Cole's name. So you can imagine the impact this letter had on me as a high school senior. Knowing who Tom Cole was, for those of you who know him, you get the feeling and know what I'm talking about. He was an interesting guy. We think he used to love the scaring the crap out of the freshmen. That seemed to really get his rocks off to scare everybody. The guy had a photographic memory, and before anybody would get on campus, he would memorize everybody's photo. We didn't know that at the time. Nobody clued us in. But the scary thing was he would greet you by name as you walked across campus. So that was my first memory the first week I was here. I'm right out on the sidewalk in front of the chapel here. This guy walks by me, and I hardly know. Good morning, Mr. Roberts. At that point, I was glad my mom made me pack extra underwear. When we became seniors, really he wasn't scary any longer. He suddenly became our best friend and colleague. And I'd later visit him in the hospital as he was dying from the ravages of pancreatic cancer. That was a painful memory, but it's also a fond one as well. And that's the really cool thing about this place. 30 years later, you've all likely had similar experiences with other professors, perhaps even Bill Plaker. So that's my favorite thing about Wabash is the community here. The students, faculty, staff, alumni, everybody's a family from day one. So Dean Klein mentioned the importance of this chapel, bringing the community together. It didn't really exist when I was a student, which is something I really regret now. It'd be nice to have a few minutes once a week to kind of sit down and have a little time with the family to talk things over. And I know that's gone over real well since chapel's been reintroduced. So we all know it's an incredibly caring community, but unfortunately the high school seniors that are coming here probably don't know how caring this community is and what's involved on deeper levels. So you really got to be the ambassadors of this community this weekend, to suit up, as Dean Klein said. So recall the brief description of my Honor Scholar weekend. Sit down and talk about, or think about your experiences. Take a few minutes to reflect on how this community has handled the trials and tribulations of this current academic year, and realize that this college, our college, needs the focus of all of you for the next few short days to keep it great and strong. I especially want to say about the upperclassmen. Some of you don't feel an obligation to participate in Honor Scholar Weekend. That was the same when I was here as well, because you figure, well, I'm not going to be around when these guys come to the college, so why should I make an effort to go out and meet them? But nothing could be further from the truth, because it's really the upperclassmen that know what makes this place tick. You've had more experiences. You can really impart to these seniors your knowledge and wisdom about why they should come here and why it would be a good fit. So to reiterate, and once again, as Dean said, this weekend is critically important. Everybody knows the economic problems that colleges face right now. It's critical to get good guys in here and fill the class. And the students are, bar none, the best people to sell this place, and I think you know that. You've really got to be able to explain why this place is different from every other place these guys are going to apply to. Because when I was touring with my son last year, it was obvious that other places can't hold a candle to Wabash as far as its ability to talk one-on-one with students. So you really need to be ready, willing, and able to explain what's different about this place to these guys and answer their questions. And be ready to defend the all-male question. That comes up all the time, and you really don't laugh it off. It's a pretty serious thing, and you need to really be able to espouse the advantages of an all-male institution as well. So to conclude, review your honors experience, the impact students, faculty, staff, anybody else you met that weekend had on your decision to come here. Take time to think about what this place means to you, and commit, especially the upperclassmen, to spending time with the high school seniors. Really show an interest this weekend. And lastly, when the guys are gone, this is real important, follow up with them. The admissions office does that, but it's critical if you meet a guy that's sharp this weekend, write down his name, his email, take his cell phone number, whatever. But call these guys in the next few days after the weekend's over. Let them know you care. Let them know you're here to answer their questions, etc. Because it's very important to get contact once you're here on campus, as evidenced by me saving this letter from Dr. Cole so many years. I still cherish this, and hopefully you guys will have similar memories. Thanks.
Hello, everybody, and good morning. My name is Steve Egan, and I'm a senior at the college. I know everyone here has a story about how they came to find Wabash, and while there may be a few unique tales out there, whether we like to admit it or not, many of our stories are probably pretty similar. I also know that even though we're aware that many of these incoming freshmen we're going to meet this weekend have stories similar to ours, it won't stop us from asking them to share their accounts of finding this place. My story isn't a particularly unique one, but I hope you'll forgive me for sharing it just the same. As a senior in high school, I tore my ACL, my MCL, and my PCL in my right knee during a high school football game. I went to go see a doctor in my hometown up in the region, and he recommended one of the best knee surgeons in the country. Many of you probably know him. His name is Dr. Shelbourne, and many of you probably also know that he's a Wally. After Dr. Shelbourne checked me out, he asked me where I was looking to study next fall. To be honest, I hadn't thought about it very much, and I told him just that. He told me I should check out Wabash, or rather, after he asked me if I'd visited campus and I responded no, he told me he wouldn't see me again unless I visited on my way home that afternoon. I had heard of Wabash and wasn't real hot on the whole all-guy thing, as I'm sure many of you probably weren't either. But I figured since I had been receiving copious amounts of mail from the school, the least I could do was check the place out. I should also mention that on my way north from Indianapolis, my mother decided it would be a good idea for us to visit that institution to the south, known so well for educating America's women. Needless to say, it did not appeal to me much. So 30 minutes later, I was at Wabash, and after a quick chat with Walter Blake in admissions, I went on my first tour of campus. Maybe it was just because I had that shiny red folder in my hand that almost everyone we passed said hello, but I didn't know about that then, and maybe even if I had, it still wouldn't have mattered. I fell in love with the place, and for the next couple of months, I made up fraternity rush events so my parents would let me come back. While my story doesn't take place over Honor Scholar Weekend, I think there are several key elements from it that we can draw upon this weekend. First off, I'm not sure why it is that Dr. Shelbourne thought I would be a good match for Wabash, but he did, and for that, I'm very grateful. But I am now, and was then, made to wonder why anyone would care who was attending their alma mater after having left it behind so many years ago. As a senior, I've pondered this often, and I'm sure whether or not you realize it, many of you other upperclassmen probably have too. We've all heard guys on campus say something along the lines of, "Why should I care who's coming here next year? I'm a senior. I won't be here, or I'll only be here with those guys for a year." After having thought about this for a while, I came to a rather selfish, but I still think widely applicable conclusion. Whether we're here or not, we still want Wabash to be the best. I take pride in being able to say that I go to Wabash, and hopefully in a couple of weeks being able to say that I graduated from Wabash. Why do we take such pride in our school? Why do we consider it to be of such better quality than other similarly sized institutions, or those institutions that could easily house our entire student body in just one of their dormitories? There are plenty of reasons why, but the point is that we do hold Wabash in such high esteem, and I think we should all hope and be sure that in 20 years, in 40 years, we'll be able to maintain a deep sense of pride when we say that we went to Wabash. Part of ensuring that Wabash remains one of the top schools in our nation is taking an active role in recruitment no matter what year you are, whether it be a first-year freshman or alumnus of half a decade. Engage an incoming freshman. Grit your teeth and ask them why they're going to Wabash. Tell them why you chose Wabash. Remember, they haven't heard those same stories over and over. My dad always said it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile, and maybe you bio majors can either confirm or deny that claim. But while it may take a little extra effort to engage a visitor to campus again, I think the sentiment is still there. How much effort will it really take for you to ask one of our visitors how their tests went? What other schools are they considering? Or if you find one looking like a lost sheep out on the mall, like so many of them probably will, to ask them if they need help finding where they're going. Encourage these guys. Get behind them now. Help find the best guys for our campus and do something about getting them to come back next fall. Do your part to make sure that next fall, someone you meet this weekend can also take pride in saying that they too are now Wabash men. Think of the pride you can take from being that one guy who talked to an incoming freshman and really made Wabash a sure thing for them. Think of the pride we can all take when this incoming class is just as strong, if not stronger, than ours or the ones that came before us. On each of my return visits to Wabash, though I was often unannounced, I was welcomed by members of several of the fraternities on campus. And while we all know that we will be accepting these seniors as our guests this weekend, it's important to remember that over the next couple of weeks, over the summer, and through next semester, it is key for us all to ensure that these future Wabash men have as positive an experience as we've all been blessed with. It is key that we welcome them not only as members into our fraternities and clubs, but that we welcome them all as members into our community. So engage these high school seniors. Show them what it means to be at Wabash. Share your stories and ask them about theirs. Get to know them. Take pride in the fact that in 40 years, you'll still be able to proudly claim membership to this community that you yourself helped shape. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your stories and your messages. Before spring break, many of you attended a meeting hosted by President White on the financial challenges facing the college. If you attended, you may remember from that meeting that 80% of the college's revenue comes from endowment and enrollment. And of course, the major problem we have is the huge drop in endowment, a burden that's been experienced by most private colleges in this country. Students asked President White, "What can we do to help?" Well, to be honest with you, there's probably little you can do to help the endowment. But you can make a difference in offsetting that grim news by contributing to a successful year in enrollment. With family incomes and retirements being affected by the economic crisis, the temptation will be greater than ever for families to choose public colleges and universities. More than ever, we need to make the case that there is a Wabash difference. And for those considering other private colleges, like our neighbors to the south, need I say more? Wabash always fights.